G'day guys, ZiggyD here and welcome back for some more Delve action. In this video I want to showcase my work in progress Templar Summoner build. It started out as a Smite Templar Summoner, kind of like what I showcased in that earlier preview video. But things have gotten a little bit weird since then. This is not a final build guide. As I said, this is work in progress, but I wanted to give you a bit of an update and a look at how things are going now that things have started to actually take shape into a rather interesting and unique looking build that I think has some interesting potential. So, I am playing a Dancing Dervish Facebreaker Summoner Guardian. Yep, if you guys had told me that I was going to be playing something like that prior to Delve, then I would have called you crazy. It sounds like a meme build, but there's a lot of interesting cross synergies here, and I think it's actually a real build, believe it or not. It's a little crazy. It's a little unusual. There's a lot to cover here, so I'm going to do my best to try and cover everything as quickly as possible for you guys in this little update, and let's get started. So, firstly, we are using Dancing Dervish. Obviously, I'm going to upgrade into the Dancing Duo Fated version of this, but this sword, if you have not seen it before, has Rampage. Rampage is a buff when you kill a bunch of monsters. You get a Rampage kill streak bonus, Call of Duty style. And then once you get that Rampage bonus, the Dancing Dervish actually jumps out of your hands. You have no weapons equipped then. And it flies around as a minion, attacking enemies. It uses Cyclone, and it's a pretty powerful minion. So there's a few things going on here that work really well in the build. Firstly, the Dancing Dervish itself is a powerful minion. Once you upgrade to Dancing Duo, you get 2 of them. And since we're playing that summoner style with a lot of minion scaling, the Dancing Dervish does a lot of damage. It's very aggressive. It clears packs really well. It'll even clear ahead of you a lot more. It's one of the most aggressive minions that I've seen before. It does pretty damn good single target damage. And I'm not even using like the optimal support gem setup for it. And because you can put 6 sockets on it and then link 6 supports to it, it effectively becomes a 7-linked minion as well. So it's very powerful. And as I said, later on we'll have 2 of them. Rampage as well is also rather interesting because Rampage gives you movement speed, damage, so that affects us, and then minion damage and minion movement speed. Minion movement speed is always fantastic on a summoner build. And then minion damage, because of that new spiritual aid node on the passive skill tree, scales our damage as well. So we effectively double dip on that Rampage bonus. And that's just really, really powerful in both us and our minions. So really nice stuff. So what about Facebreakers? Why Facebreakers? So there's a few reasons why Facebreakers. Initially I started with Facebreakers before I was even using Dancing Dervish, and that's because of Herald of Purity. Herald of Purity gives a lot of flat physical damage to attacks. Currently it's giving me 23 to 35 added physical damage to attacks, which is just huge on Facebreakers. Facebreakers, if you're not familiar, have a big multiplier to flat physical damage, and essentially you run around punching things as an unarmed build, and you stack whatever flat physical damage to attacks you can get. And Herald of Purity gives a lot of it. And with the Summoner Ascendancy, we also get increased buff effect for Herald of Purity, which gets us even more. Early endgame, Herald of Purity alone is enough to have enough DPS on Facebreakers. It gives a pretty solid amount. And then later on, you can get a lot of flat physical damage through jewelry and added gear and things like that. So you can get pretty good damage here. In fact, I basically doubled my DPS from this dual-wielding weapon setup I was using when I reached endgame, when I swapped over to Facebreakers. So it's pretty solid. And obviously, because Dancing Dervish leaves our hands, that leaves us unarmed, and Facebreakers allows us to continue attacking. So that's kind of why it makes sense in this setup, and it seems to work pretty nicely. Additionally to that, Consecrated Path and Smite, 2 of the skills that work well in this build, work with Facebreakers, and I'm using Consecrated Path right here. It is a very good clear speed AoE skill. It has a built-in teleport that teleports you to enemies. It has control though, unlike Flicker Strike, you can control it. And it also leaves some consecrated ground that heals you and your minions. So we use this to initially get our Rampage bonuses with Dancing Dervish, because you can Consecrate Slam with the Dervish, so that's fine. And then, once it leaves our hands, we Consecrated Path Slam around with our Facebreakers, and we do enough damage to clear most packs, and that's what we need to do. And the reason for this, and I think this makes a lot of sense in a build like this, is that minions don't tend to clear very well. They're excellent at killing bosses, but they don't have the best clearing because they're a little dumb on the AI. The only minions that clear really well are projectile minions that just spam projectiles everywhere. But that's not quite what we're using here, though potentially you could explore some of that with some sentinels or some specters or something like that. But my idea here is that we do some of the clearing, or maybe even the bulk of the clearing, because we're good at clearing. Us players, we are great at clear speed in Path of Exile. We've had years of practice at it, right? So Consecrated Path is a teleporting AoE skill with very good AoE. I'm even using Concentrated Effect here, by the way. We get very good AoE, especially because of Radiant Crusade, which gives you... Oh, wait, no, I think it's Unwavering Crusade, which gives you area of effect for each summoned Sentinel of Purity. So we get area scaling through that and through the Templar tree. So very good AoE, even with Concentrated Effect. So we have a teleporting AoE skill that just smashes packs. So we use that to clear speed and provide buffs and things for our minions. And then our minions, because we're teleporting around, teleport to us all the time and clear anything we miss, or any tough rares, or any tougher packs, and they shred any bosses. And it works well, man. We do the clear speeding, and then the minions do the boss killing. It feels right. And it feels like, I don't know if I could go back to a regular summoner after this. It just feels so nice. So I mentioned I'm using Herald of Purity for that flat physical damage with Facebreakers, but that is not the only reason. It also gives us 4 minions, 4 little Sentinels of Purity, and these guys are pretty powerful. I've actually got them linked up to a few supports, and these guys do very good damage. They add a lot of damage to bosses, and they even clear some packs and things like that reasonably well as long as they get to them. So as you're teleporting them around, they do a pretty good job of that. And with the Guardian Ascendancy, they gain an extra Crusade Slam skill as well. So they have some nice looking-ish AoE skills. So they're pretty solid. And obviously we have a lot of minion damage scaling, which makes them quite powerful. In addition to that, I'm using zombies. They have a similar effect. They act as a great meat shield. They do a lot of damage, extra damage to bosses, and just the fact we're running so many minions, we're doing a lot of damage to bosses. And they also have a slam skill built in, so they do a pretty good job all round. Originally, I was running 8 zombies, but I cut back to 6 because I felt like it wasn't quite worth the extra investment for the extra 2. And I'll take a look at the passive tree in a little while. Spectres, I'm using 2 Spectres, 2 different Chieftains. Now, these Chieftains are available from Part 2 of the campaign, Ashen Fields in Act 7. It's a Host Chieftain and a Carnage Chieftain. And these guys generate Frenzy and Power charges for all nearby allies. So they give us and our minions Power and Frenzy charges. Now, charges are a lot stronger on minions than they are on players, so that's a hefty damage buff for our massive army of minions. So it works really nicely, and the Frenzy is a nice little bonus for us. We're using Resolute Technique, so the power charges don't matter for us, but it's mainly for the minions anyway. So you could go damage-dealing Spectres. You could use something like Knitted Horrors, or maybe some sort of other melee attacking Spectres that are decent. I don't know, there's a lot to explore in terms of Spectres, and there's even some new stuff in the mines as well, so potentially more things to explore there. But just since we have so many pretty strong minions already, including Dancing Dervish and later on the Dancing Duo pair, I figured something that's going to buff all of those minions and us would be a little better. And these monkeys do very well. In addition to that, I'm using the Holy Relic. He's a nice little buddy. He only really takes 1 socket. Sockets are a bit of a stress, but I feel like he's worth it. And he provides a lot of regen to minions, so any time they take damage, he heals them up pretty nicely. And we're also using Vile Summoned Skeletons, which is just fantastic for any tougher packs, any dangerous things, lock boxes and stuff like that. And they just shred bosses. There's a lot of skeletons here. They do a lot of damage, especially if you link them up, and with all the minion damage scaling we have. And there's so many of them. They do a great job of locking down most melee enemies and stopping them from getting to you, and they block most projectiles as well. The one downside of a playstyle like this, as you can tell visually speaking, is that it is very hard to tell what's going on. Yep, it's pretty full on. You have an army of minions. If you're used to playing just by yourself and surrounded by enemies, you have a pretty good idea of what's going on visually speaking most of the time. When you have a bit of an army, it's a bit of a different game. You feel like you're commanding an army and just trying to like watch the shape of the battlefield, and it takes a bit of practice to get used to. And yeah, it's definitely a bit of a downside that it can be a bit hard to make out what's going on at times. Other utility skills I'm using, I use Phase Run. Because we can't really use Leap Slam or Shield Charge because the Dancing Dervish leaves our hands, and once it leaves our hands we can't Leap Slam, we can't use Shield Charge because we can't use a shield when we're using Dancing Dervish. So I use Phase Run as a bit of an extra mobility skill, also it boosts our melee damage while the buff is active. So it's seemingly the best option. You could maybe use Flame Dash to cross gaps. I use Leap Slam currently when my sword's in my hands to cross gaps, or if I'm doing like trials and stuff like that. And then Convocation is pretty much mandatory. It's a super useful utility skill for summoners. It allows you to teleport all your minions to you and heal them. It's great in the mines, especially because if your minions have wandered off to fight in the darkness, you can convocate them back to you and draw the monsters back into the light. So that works pretty nicely. So let's transition on over here. Hi guys, and we'll take a look at my setup. I'll run you through quickly. So as I said, you 6-socket your Dancing Dervish, all the supports in there will support it. These are not currently optimal. I'll tell you the optimal setup. Minion speed, minion damage, maim, accuracy, very important. And these two are not optimal. So instead of faster attacks and culling, I would use melee physical damage and melee physical damage on full life. I think that's probably the optimal setup. So I still have yet to fix that. In my helmet right now, and you'll notice a theme here, we're very pressured for sockets, and this is definitely, as I said, work in progress. I'm figuring out what are the best things to use and how to optimize our socket setup, and things might change a little bit. But Raise Spectre with Summon Holy Relic and Blood Magic and Convocation in here. Raise Spectre linked to Blood Magic is rather important. The Chieftains won't use their ability more than once because their mana pools are really small, so they'll use it only every now and then. If you want to get up to 3 charges, they need to be linked to Blood Magic, and then they will spam the skill ceaselessly, so that works very nice. Next up, we have that Consecrated Path setup. I'm just using melee physical damage, elemental damage with attack support, and concentrated effect. If you wanted to use Smite, you could swap elemental damage with attacks to Ancestral Call instead, potentially, and maybe swap out concentrated effect for something else. In my Facebreakers here, currently I'm using Phase Run, and then we got Blasphemy, Vulnerability, and right now I'm using Leap Slam. Now an interesting thing is maybe this socket could be swapped to like a War Cry, like Enduring Cry, and then you could potentially use Deed Bellow. This thing here, in addition to flat physical, which is really nice for Facebreakers, as well as very useful dexterity for the build, which is a bit of a struggle to get, you and nearby allies have 20% increased attack, cast, and move speed if you've War Cried recently. So you could go around spamming Enduring Cry and give all of your minions a very big buff. Another skill I currently don't have that you could maybe try and work in, maybe think of something you could sacrifice for it, is a Flesh Offering to speed up all those minions and amp up their damage for bosses. I haven't really felt like I've needed it. We do a lot of damage to bosses, just like popping that Vile Summon Skeleton. So I haven't really felt like I've needed it, but that is an option for later on that we could explore. I'm using a Bone Helmet because minion damage affects both us and our minions, so very nice. Probably better than any lab enchant. As you can tell, my gear's pretty rubbish, currently speaking. I don't have any physical damage there. I have a bit of physical damage on my rings. These could obviously be steel rings if you wanted to really amp up your damage a lot more. But since, again, like I said, we're only really trying to clear trash and then having our minions kill anything tougher, you don't really actually need a lot of damage. Herald of Purity and just a bit of damage, well, with the pretty good amount of scaling that we get on the tree and everything, it will probably be enough long term, but we'll see. I'll have to explore that. Again, work in progress. And then finally, currently I'm using Tabula Rasa here. I've got 3 skills in here: Herald of Purity, Summon Skeleton, and Raise Zombie, and they are linked to Fortify, which is mainly for the zombies, Minion Speed, which is good for everything, and Brutality. Obviously, if you wanted to use Smite, which feeds elemental damage, you'd probably want to swap this out for Minion Damage support instead. If you wanted to go something into like Knitted Horrors, you could use Bloodlust on your minions as well, so that'd be another option, and yeah, potentially something to explore. So much to potentially explore here. For the Guardian Ascendancy, obviously Radiant and Unwavering Crusade. Long term, we may want to transition, and this is something I'm going to have to explore again, into this like Mana Guardian Energy Shield hybrid setup. So Radiant Faith allows you to reserve your mana and get a lot of extra energy shield for you and your minions. And then we could go into Unwavering Faith. Right now I'm using Time of Need. It's alright. I'm life-based right now, obviously, but we could explore either a hybrid Energy Shield life setup, long-term, later. Don't really need to now, but later on. Or we could even potentially go low life and stack a lot of auras. So lots to explore there. I'm currently just using Tabula Rasa, so wouldn't be too hard to get to about 5k-ish life, but Energy Shield certainly has a much higher limit on what we could get to in terms of that effective life pool. On the passive tree, Templar Area, Minion nodes here. We got Resolute Technique, which I think is better than Elemental Overload because our accuracy is quite low. It's pretty difficult to get accuracy here. Obviously, the life clusters here, the Minion cluster here, Grave Pact, really good. Make sure to get the Leech node, super essential. Death Attunement, so we can have those 2 Monkey Spectres. The Witch Area and life nodes here. I did originally get Grave Intentions, but ended up dropping it. Didn't really feel like it was worth it to get the extra 2 zombies, but that is an option here. And obviously, Spiritual Command for the minion attack speed scaling, and Spiritual Aid is super essential, so you definitely want to get those. and I made sure to get like a little bit of extra survivability stuff here. We could fine tune some of that. The other thing is to get a little bit of reduced mana reservation if you're running what I'm running, which is a this particular link setup with Herald of Purity, in addition to a vulnerability blasphemy. So again, kind of non-final on the auras. If you wanted to stack a lot of auras, you could not link your Herald of Purity stuff and just use them as like a little bit of support, not make them super strong, and stack a lot of auras instead. And you could explore other curses, but because most of our minions deal a lot of physical damage, I found vulnerability to be the most effective so far. One more thing while I remember, jewels are pretty important on summoner builds, generally speaking. This is an example of a pretty nice jewel here. There's another mod that I haven't got yet that I really want to get, but added damage to minions is fine. Minion damage, or like this one over here, attack speed. These mods are really nice. So this one, minions have increased attack speed if your minions or you have killed recently. Now that also gives you attack speed as well. So it gives all your minions 8% attack speed and us. And that's always active. This one here is a little bit trickier to keep active, but minion damage if you've used a minion skill recently. Convocation counts as a minion skill, and you'll use that pretty often whenever it's off cooldown. So that's pretty nice as well. Again, minion damage there scales you. The added flat minion damage doesn't scale for you, but that just adds to your minions. So probably something like Taunt is really good. All your minions taunting means that you'll take less damage, and it also distracts any enemies. And also Minions Blind is a fantastic mod that you'll definitely want to get at least one of. So I'm going to look out for a Minion Blind duel. But probably like the optimal scenario is something like stacking these attack speed mods with some life, Minion Taunt, Minion Blind, and maybe a little bit of that Minion Damage mods like those ones there. So these are both on the Ghastly Eye duels from the Abyss chests. So you want to keep an eye out for those guys. Alrighty guys, that was a lot. Hopefully I covered everything at the moment. I'll keep you guys updated as I explore new setups, maybe refine things a bit more. If you have any questions about anything that hasn't been explained well enough here, I probably missed something, so feel free to ask in the comments below. And if you have any suggestions on what we could explore and things we could try, then let me know that as well. Anyway guys, if you want to catch some more Delve content in the future, then check out that juicy red subscriber button. I would suggest maybe massaging some butter into that, maybe some herbs and spices, let it sit for 12 to 24 hours, and then come back and subscribe. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching. I'll see you guys soon.